I was kneeling by the main control panel in the noisy factory when my boss suddenly appeared and fired me in front of everyone. His face red with anger as he told me to pack my things and leave immediately. Everyone in the factory thought I had caused the major breakdown that was costing $35,000 every hour, and I felt their eyes on me like judgment, but I did not cry or defend myself. I simply stood up, took my bag, and walked out with the sound of machines fading behind me. However, when I got to my car parked a block away, my phone buzzed with an email from someone who had sent me a file marked for eyes only. And when I opened it, I saw screenshots of system logs that showed someone else had ignored the safety protocols and left the breakdown ready to happen. This email was like a light turning on in a dark room. My panic went away because now I knew the firing was a setup and someone had planned this carefully to hurt me and destroy my reputation. Over the next few days, I returned to the factory quietly under the excuse of checking on paperwork, and I observed everything carefully. I noticed my boss bragging in the cafeteria about the disaster, telling managers that he had noticed it first and taking all the credit for discovering it. And his arrogance became my advantage because every word he said was a piece of a puzzle that I was putting together. I watched how he moved, how he talked, and how he smiled when he was lying. Then one night when I was sitting in my tiny apartment with my laptop glowing in the dark, I found a hidden folder on the server buried under months of files that did not matter. And inside that folder were manipulated logs, deleted emails, and clear evidence of deliberate sabotage, which made my heart race because I understood that this was not just about my career. It was about someone trying to destroy my name and my future. I called a trusted colleague to try to understand if they would notice the discrepancies in the files, but when we spoke, fear was clear in their voice. I stopped thinking like a victim and started thinking like a detective, building a timeline of events and mapping out emails, security footage, and witness statements. I learned to watch my boss in small ways, noticing his body language, the tone of his voice, and the tiny expressions that crossed his face when he was nervous or lying. I discovered that he had a habit of celebrating at a bar near the factory where he would drink and brag about team failures that he controlled. I started going to that same bar as a regular customer, sitting quietly in corners, listening to everything he said, and writing down every contradiction and every lie. When I had gathered logs, timestamps, and confirmation from a few witnesses, I approached the human resources department, but I was careful not to show all of my evidence at once. Instead, I left small clues like breadcrumbs for them to follow. The HR department was skeptical at first, but when they noticed one strange thing about the timing of certain emails, their curiosity was awakened. And I smiled quietly to myself because my first small victory was starting to grow. That same evening, I received an anonymous note slipped under my apartment door saying, "They know you are onto something. Be careful," which told me that someone else knew what I was doing and that the danger was becoming real. I realized that I could not do this alone, so I reached out to a former colleague, and we met at a coffee shop. My colleague slid a small USB drive across the table with her eyes darting around nervously, and inside were copies of internal emails and system logs that showed clearly who had manipulated the breakdown. I studied these files in silence, my heart pounding like a drum, and I realized that my boss's web of lies was much more complicated than I had imagined. He had been framing me for months, and a few executives were helping him without even knowing they were doing something wrong. When I left the coffee shop, I saw my boss's car parked across the street, and I understood that the danger was real and that someone was watching my every move. I spent nights sitting at my laptop, overlaying email timestamps with video footage from security cameras. I noticed small patterns in my boss's behavior. He sent long emails at exactly 3:17 in the afternoon, confident that no one was watching him. I scheduled my submissions to the HR department to happen exactly at those moments, ensuring that the contrast between the truth and his lies would be impossible to ignore. I created a detailed timeline of the sabotage, showing every step he had taken to hurt me. Then a surprising new email arrived from someone on the executive team who hinted that they already suspected there was misconduct happening in the factory. I understood that timing was everything. So I waited for the perfect moment to strike, watching and planning like a chess player who sees 10 moves ahead. During a company meeting, my boss arrogantly presented a report about how well the factory had recovered from the breakdown, smirking as if he expected people to praise him. But I quietly circulated my evidence to a select group of people, pointing out the contradictions between what he was saying and what the evidence showed. Whispers began to move through the room as executives read the proof on their tablets, and I noticed his eyes start to flicker with worry, and a small twitch appeared in his jaw, the first sign that his confidence was starting to crack. My pulse was steady, my breathing controlled, and I stayed calm, letting him fall apart under the weight of his own arrogance and lies. After the meeting, a confidential email from HR arrived saying, "We need to talk. Your evidence is very strong." I was called to a private meeting with the HR department, and I brought all my evidence, carefully organized, logs, emails, timestamps, and witness statements arranged so that anyone could understand them. The executives were quiet as they read through everything, whispering among themselves about what they were discovering. While they did this, my boss tried to argue and defend himself, but his words meant nothing compared to the hard evidence that showed clearly what he had done. I had position colleagues who had actually seen the sabotage happen to confirm the details, doing this silently and legally without getting emotional. My boss's confidence fell apart when HR told him that an internal audit was going to happen immediately. He had underestimated my patience and the care I had put into preparing my case. I walked out of the HR meeting with my head held high, calm and composed. Over the next several days, audits revealed the complete extent of his manipulation, and executives began to question every decision he had made, and his credibility started to crumble. Yet I remained quiet, going about my routine as if nothing had changed. Every lie he told was like another nail being hammered into the coffin of his career. That evening, a whisper reached me from the factory floor saying, "He knows someone is against him, but he does not know it is you." And my smile was quiet, but a feeling of satisfaction surged through my body. However, I noticed something strange in the audit reports, small differences that did not make sense. I realized that someone else had been giving him selective information to frame me. I traced these clues back through the files and emails, and I discovered that a mid-level manager, usually very quiet and always overlooked, had been playing both sides. I documented everything about this manager and waited, letting all the pieces fall into place without revealing my hand. At a team lunch, I observed my boss subtly shift all the blame onto the mid-level manager, and I knew he did not realize I had proof that he had orchestrated the entire breakdown while secretly using the manager as a puppet. My boss sent an urgent email ordering changes to hide his tracks, but he made a mistake. He accidentally sent it to the wrong department, and now I had access to it. I compiled this new email and compared it with all my earlier evidence, and the picture became crystal clear. There was deliberate sabotage, false reporting, and manipulation of people beneath him. I created a master timeline that highlighted every lie with exact timestamps, and I even included video footage of him giving contradictory instructions during the breakdown. I sent a subtle message to HR saying, "Please review this for inconsistencies," and the trap was set. My boss called a private meeting with a senior executive, not knowing that I had already leaked selected evidence into their email inbox. The senior executive confronted my boss, and I watched from a distance, and the evidence spoke louder than any words. The executive's tone was sharp, and the questions were direct, and my boss stammered and struggled, trying to control the story. His arrogance was now falling apart like a house made of cards. As he left the meeting, the executive muttered, "We will need a full review, starting with you." And panic flashed across my boss's face for the first time. I discovered that the mid-level manager had started deleting critical emails and files, trying to cover their tracks before HR could find out. I acted quickly and retrieved backups that I had secretly stored on a secure cloud drive. I now had irrefutable proof that connected both my boss and the manager to the sabotage. That night, I received a direct call from HR saying, "We need to see you first thing tomorrow morning, and please bring all the evidence that you have." My heart raced from the thrill of inevitability, knowing that justice was finally within reach. I arrived at HR early the next morning, laptop in hand, my heart steady, my breathing controlled. I calmly laid out all my evidence in perfect order, manipulated emails, security footage, logs, timestamps, and witness statements. I watched as the HR director's eyes widened while scanning the timeline. Word spread through the factory very quickly, and my boss noticed whispers in the hallways and colleagues giving him awkward looks. A senior executive called for a private meeting with both my boss and the mid-level manager, and they did not know that I had every single word of that meeting recorded. I strategically made sure the recordings reached the executive's inbox right before it started. Within minutes, the executives played the recordings, and they showed clear contradictions, lies, and deliberate sabotage that could not be explained away. My boss glared in my direction, finally recognizing that I had orchestrated this entire silent counterattack. Desperate and running out of options, my boss tried to spin the blame onto a junior employee. But HR and the executives had all the evidence lined up and ready. His arrogance now worked completely against him. A colleague whispered a warning to me. He is trying to delete more files tonight, but I was already prepared. I remotely backed up every file that he tried to delete, and every attempt to hide his tracks only added more proof showing deliberate wrongdoing. I received a text message from HR that simply said, "Prepare for the board meeting. Everything will be revealed." And at the board meeting, I sat quietly in the back of the room with my laptop closed. Executives presented a detailed timeline of manipulation, sabotage, and lies, and every lie my boss had told was countered with hard evidence. The board asked questions that my boss could not answer, and the mid-level manager attempted excuses that sounded hollow. Colleagues watched in stunned silence, many realizing that I had orchestrated the entire downfall without a single public confrontation. My boss whispered, "She played me flawlessly." And by the end of the day, both were removed from their positions at the factory. My name was cleared, my role was reinstated, and I quietly reclaimed my position at the factory with my head held high. There were no dramatic speeches and no shouting, just composed victory and the satisfaction of knowing that justice had been served. Weeks later, the factory ran smoothly again, and my colleagues respected me not just for my skill with the machines, but for my strategy, my patience, and my integrity. I walked past the same machines that had once threatened my career, now fully operational and running smoothly, and a sense of calm satisfaction settled over me like a warm blanket. Revenge was not loud or messy. It was inevitable, silent, and complete, and I had been underestimated by everyone around me, and that underestimation had become my greatest weapon. The subtle smile on my face showed that the woman who was once broken was now far ahead of everyone else.